Vinay, you're on mute and the broadcast is live now. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charulata and I'm going to be your host and the panel moderator for the second panel. A very warm welcome to all our speakers and all of you in the audience. Welcome to this virtual conference, Transforming Business Through Procurement, organized by Celerity Supply Chain Tribe. At Celerity Supply Chain Tribe, we aim to be a one-point source by generating first-hand, credible content on relevant business topics through multiple channels and media. It's been 2 years since a new chapter was scripted in our lives and our career. This disruption, which led to chaos in the initial year, has now led to a quiet confidence. A confidence stemming from resilience and adaptability. New norms have been set. Being sustainable and technology driven have become the focal points in any organization. And the procurement and sourcing function is right in the middle of it. So, all of you in the audience, stay tuned in since we have two back to back panels coming up. And keep writing comments and asking questions in the comments section. We will take these up during the discussion. So, without further ado, let us just get straight on to our first panel, where our panelists will share their experiences on sustainable and ethical sourcing. Please put your hands together for Mr. Ashwin Kak, Mr. Kanishk Negi, Mr. Peter Woon, and Mr. Vinay Chauhan. I now invite our moderator, Mr. Sanjay Desai, to take this forward. Over to you, Sanjay ji.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are. Thank you, Charulata. Thank you, Supply Chain Tribe. And thank you so much, my colleagues, right? Peter, Kanishk, Vinay, and Ashwin for giving your invaluable time to us. Before I start, I would like to render my sincere apologies on behalf of Celerity for a 15-minute break because of some technical glitch with our applications. But things are sorted out and we are back on time. Thank you all delegates who have been supporting us for the last entire year and a half when we started to run these webinars. And you have given an incredible support to us, even including today. So thank you very much once again for being there for you, for being there for us. And and your impetus is something that keeps us driving. Procurement, and as Charulata said, the tone, we have two wonderful back-to-back sessions, and then there are some 8 to 10 speakers that you'll be hearing their wisdom, their experience, and everything that they have done in their professional career. Procurement in the last 5 years has changed, and you as procurement leaders, many of you would know that, right? Many corporations have pledged to work with only those suppliers that adhere to social and environmental compliance. Maybe 5 years back, this whole knowledge of ethical procurement and what is ethical procurement, what is sustainable procurement, wasn't there. Procurement function was seen as a cost derivative, as a cost saving function, right? Year over year, run down 10% cost, work with your vendors, ask them what is your should cost, what should be the wood cost, and eventually give us savings. But in the last 5 years, as customers got intelligent, technology came into foray, industries moved on, and also with some of the not so nice things as COVID, which actually push the entire industry or the point of equilibrium. And that is how now we are changing in terms of our customer diversity, in terms of how you approach customers, and how procurement is a major function to start with that. So let's go over to our panelists, and I would like to request Ashwin, Kanish, Vinay, and Peter to self-introduce themselves. Over to you, Ashwin.
Hi everyone, Ashwin here. I head procurement and sustainability for AB InBev India and Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Ashwin. So nice to have you, Kanishk.
Hello, everyone. Very happy to be part of the discussion today. I'm Kanishk Negi. I work as Sustainable Procurement Director with the Global Procurement Function at Schneider Electric. Thank you. Sanjay, back to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vinay.
Yeah, hi, I'm Vinay Chauhan. I'm working for Bridgestone Corporation, currently based in India as head emerging markets.
Thank
Thank
you very
you.
much, Vinay, and good to have you here, Peter.
Hi everyone, my name is Peter Woon. I'm a senior director with Cushman and Wakefield heading up the supply chain department in Cushman and Wakefield based out of Singapore. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter, and good to have you. And you can imagine the diversity we have, right? We have a CSR sustainability champion, right? From a consumer product, we have a sustainability and GRI champion from engineering and Schneider Electric kind of a company. Then we have, as we say, right, the rubber meets the road. We have a tire manufacturing giant, right, Vinay, and then we have a green and ecosystem player, which also does with facility planning, right, engineering and technology. So this is indeed a very diverse panel, and I'm just kind of lay a bit of a functional knowledge to that. My name is Sanjay Desai. I'm based in Singapore. I run my own couple of gigs, work with some of the most brilliant minds in startup and MSME enterprises. I also run my supply chain, talent development, and management repository. So let's start my first question with Peter. And Peter, we heard the term responsible procurement. Can you explain this whole focus on responsible, sustainable, and ethical from a procurement standpoint? And what does it mean to the end customer, actually, Peter?
Okay, responsible and ethical procurement is not new, and yet it's not old. Like what you rightly say, procurement organizations have been traditionally linked with cost savings, getting the best cost out of the system, getting values in your supply chain and so on. So it was a very, we are viewed as very much in a very hard kind of data driven and very, very cost driven kind of culture and activity. But of late, recently, as what we look into the supply chain, we have noticed that there's also other elements that procurement get involved in, particularly in the area of risk management, particularly in the area of compliance and so on and so forth. So ethical sourcing came about from the need for risk management. Risk management primarily for the company, the brand that the company is trying to protect, its product, its services, and try to ensure that whatever sourcing activity that we do for the company and for the product and services that they offer must be obtained through a sustainable and responsible method and methodology. This process, I ensure that that the company actually protects its brand, so that if there's any negative reports resulting from the sourcing of these activities in an irresponsible way will not impact the company in the long run. So this is getting more and more, gaining more importance lately, and particularly as consumers right now, as well as the new age range of consumers across the board are beginning to get more aware about the sustainability initiatives around the world. At the same time, they are also demanding that the manufacturers and the service providers get more responsible in their sourcing strategy and be able to deliver a sustainable and ethical product to them.
First class, Peter. And does the mantra of sustainable and ethical procurement uh, applies to both the buyer and as well as the seller also?
Yes, it does. It's actually an ecosystem. Okay, so it's not only from the buyer perspective, but also the seller perspective. So you cannot work on one on one side. It has to be an ecosystem that that's throughout the entire supply chain.
Exactly. So it's the ecosystem. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Getting Kanishk on screen, and Kanishk talking about ecosystem. Schneider has always been a very strong ecosystem player, and with the merger again, right, with L&T has been something fantastic that has been talked about. How do you see sustainable procurement, and what does it mean for a Schneider engineering or products that you sell?
Thanks, Sanjay. I think that's a very pertinent question. So when we look at the strategic mission of procurement at Schneider Electric, sustainability is one of the foundation pillars along with bottom line and other key impact areas. And as a general rule, we not only focus on the achievement of the business targets, but equally analyze how these targets are achieved. And our sustainable procurement strategy, which is a subset of the broader procurement strategy, provides that framework for us. So for us in global procurement at Schneider, sustainability means ensuring an ethical, compliant supply chain where we not only focus and engage with our suppliers to ensure there are no malpractices, but we go beyond the legal requirements and constantly challenge the premise or selection of materials that we are purchasing, the way our suppliers are operating in different geographies, etc. And we also constantly challenge ourselves and our own colleagues in businesses, R&D, technology center within Schneider, whether the materials that we are buying are these the best choices of materials? Or we can modify, push the limits of various technical thresholds, and influence the selection of raw materials that are low carbon, more circular, and have a much less impact on the biodiversity through their life cycle. But all of this cannot be done alone. So we have special programs with our partners, with our suppliers on different thematic areas. And again, these are guided by the sustainable procurement strategy that we have implemented. So on the topic of climate action, we launched a zero carbon project in the month of April last year, where we onboarded more than 1,000 suppliers globally and are jointly working to reduce their cumulative scope 1 and scope 2 emissions by 50% by end of 2025. On the thematic area of circularity, we are working with our raw material suppliers to innovate and develop materials, plastics, ferrous, non-ferrous metals, which are green, have low environmental footprint, are much less, let's say, much more benign through their life cycle and even when they are disposed. And we are also revamping our packaging to make sure that we phase out all the single-use plastics and use only the recycled cardboard in the entire packaging by end of 2025.
Yes, Kanishk. Can you hear us, Kanishk?
And finally, we are also pushing the boundaries of working conditions that we expect to be followed requirements and malpractices around human first place rather than identifying and correct additional these require working plans that all our procurement teams globally are implementing. This is also embedded in the financial incentives for the senior leadership, including the CEO, functional heads, and down below. And if we do not meet these targets, and if you do not meet these requirements, our financial incentives take a hit. And the performance around these topics are also audited by statutory auditors and are part of our annual financial disclosure. So I can confidently say sustainability is embedded in the DNA of the procurement at Schneider Electric. So that's Sanjay, sustainability for us in procurement.
Fantastic. And you talked about a few things. You talked about the zero carbon and the Schneider's efficiency of getting 1,700 suppliers into scope 2 and scope 3. You talked about circularity and you also talked about revamping packaging, right?
Yeah.
Is this something possible across the entire Schneider as a global, all the divisions, or is it something limited to the division and the BU that you work with?
No. So my role is I'm part of the global procurement function, and my responsibility is to work along with the entire spectrum of teams, globally
Exactly.
around the world. So the way we implement is the sustainable procurement strategy identifies these thematic areas, and these areas are then adopted by the annual working plans by all the teams, and
Sure.
they then implement actions or implement let's say initiatives to meet these requirements. So at the end of the
First.
year, when the performance appraisal is happening, it's not just on cost reduction or productivity or quality parameters, but it is also on how many of our suppliers who are identified for specific initiatives met the specific targets which were set at the beginning of the cycle. So this is equally let's say serious criteria for the evaluation of teams performance and even individual performance when it comes to the evaluation of programs or even individual appraisal.
Yeah. How many total suppliers, just a number you have that you work with today, just from a diversity perspective?
The supply Schneider has a huge supply base. We have more than 50,000 suppliers globally
50,000
across
suppliers.
various
Okay.
categories. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to understand the diversity. And then the reason is, Ashwin, I'm coming to you and more from a diversity perspective, right? And in terms of AB Bev, right? It's a consumer product, a lot of consumers are consuming. What is supplier diversity to you and how does it affect sustainable and ethical sourcing?
Thank you, Sanjay. And I would say quite important inputs from both our speakers so far. So one of the most important thing, and I would like to take a step back here. I think it's important to realize that probably an incident like the Rana Plaza, which happened a decade
Yes.
back, was like a flashpoint when it comes to DNI in general in the supply chain. When you look at it, I think from that point, if you see how far we have progressed now and what really is happening, and by this I mean the larger industry, the larger corporate space in which we are in, it's been immense, right? The kind of changes that have taken place now.
Mm.
When you look at diversity, I am also intentionally adding inclusion to it because those are sort of two sides to the same coin. I'll probably take two examples to explain how we probably address it in our supply chain. So I'll probably take a raw material example for you and a packaging material example for you. So when you look at the work that we do with barley farmers in India, we are very clearly looking at the side of, okay, how can we ensure that the farmer is getting a soil test result, they know what input to apply, they're not excessively applying something. So that's probably one way we are working with them in a 360-degree way. But something else that we also did as a pilot in the previous year was actually a pilot on an RSP, or what we call as responsible sourcing principles, which is an embedded principle that we have within, where we
Mm.
actually started reaching out to the women farmers in the family, because we realized that although the women in the family are doing most of the work when it comes to farming, they are not really officially registered anywhere as farmers. So they
Mm.
probably have lack of access to finance or something like that. And we did a pilot in the state of Haryana and parts of Rajasthan. The response that we got to it in terms of those women farmers completely embracing this initiative, starting their own micro entrepreneurship initiatives, was immense. So that was probably one way we started looking at it from a farming ecosystem, if you look at it. Then when you look at the packaging space, it's very interesting, right? The industry we are in, we have returnable glass bottles and we have cans. So there are ways in which we work with our suppliers or intermediary partners to either increase the returnable content,
Mm.
returnability of those bottles that are there, or increasing the recycled content in the cans. But somewhere in getting those numbers right, what is really important for us also to understand is that the way these bottles and cans return in our supply chain, they pass through probably 7 or 8 layers. And there is that first mile in the supply chain, which is the waste picker or the waste handler. They are sort of left aside somewhere. Like, one telling fact for you, waste handlers or waste pickers in the country have an average lifespan of 39 years, which is like
Mm.
half of the average lifespan which is there for a general population. So over there, then we have started working with our bottles and can suppliers, and now we are looking at how can we address the needs of that first mile in the supply chain. So that's probably one way we have started looking at it, and that's how you sort of look at the entire sustainable and ethical sourcing sort of merging together within the procurement function and getting embedded, because a lot of what I'm talking about is actually not being implemented by people who carry sustainability designations, but these are procurement category leads or the agriculture team which is implementing all of this.
Excellent. I like the way you said that sustainability and ethical sourcing now is merging. And as you said, Ashwin, I was thinking, is this something that should start with procurement, or is there any other function that you need to have a corporate social responsibility kind of a structure overarching uh, that will drive this? What's your take on this? Should procurement lead it right away and take the bull by the horn, as we say?
So that's an interesting question. Now, the thing is, different corporates have different structures or ways they address it. Now,
Yes.
there are certain corporates which would either have an integrated team, there are others which would have a separate CSR team, a separate corporate affairs team, a separate sustainability team, in some cases, the HR or the people team in the plant itself implementing it. So, I would say, looking at it agnostically in terms of what the structure is, these
Hmm.
teams will need to work with each other. And I speak
Exactly.
from probably my own experience in AB InBev also, where all of these initiatives that I talked about, we actually work very closely with our corporate affairs team, which also has the CSR professionals inside it. So we are sort of
Yes.
joined at the hips when it comes to implementing these initiatives. And it would be the same, like when I was in my previous organization in Pidlite, we were implementing a foundation based approach to CSR, but we were working with a lot of technical experts which would otherwise have been in the sustainability or ESG space. So that's how the integration and merger, I would say, that is something which will be the future and which is hopefully the present in most of the corporates.
Amazing, amazing view. I like that answer. And let's move on to Vinay. And Vinay, we talked about, Peter talked about ecosystem. Kanish brought about the element of sustainable procurement, zero carbon. And Ashwin actually talked about returnable containers and then, merging sourcing and sustainable, right? I would like Vinay you to get us combining all these three elements. Can you provide an example of ethical sourcing? And if there is, your function, Bridgestone doing it, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, Sanjay, thank you. And since I come from a tire industry and we are all consumers of tires, let me start with the base by decoding what a tire is. So basically, tire is made up of number of components. 50% is rubber, and out of that
Yes.
50%, 25% is natural rubber, and 25% is synthetic rubber. Then we have 23%, which is carbon black, which is a partial combustion of oil. So synthetic rubber and carbon black, they come from the oil industry. Then we have got polyester, which is again a petrochemical product. Then we have steel wire, belt wires, bead wires, which are coming from the steel industry, iron ore, mining, and coke. And then we have got multiple chemicals, organic, inorganic, oils, which are mixed together. And that is how a tire is prepared. Now, let me take the example of natural rubber, because natural rubber is composing of 25%. So natural rubber sources are limited in the world, which coming from Southeast Asian countries, uh,
Yes.
West Africa, South America. And these are in the rainforest areas.
Yeah.
Now, what happens in this industry is 85% of the land holders are small holders. So they have got very limited voice. And tire industry so they in the expanding into which is a urban
Hi, we are back, right? There was some technical disturbance, and I think we also lost Vinay. All right. So let's get back into the action. And Kanish, getting you onto the screen, and in terms of some of the point that Vinay was talking about, right? You talked about rubber plantation. You kind of touched a bit about environment and bringing the climate action into your approach, right? The recent IPCC report suggests that India as a country, we are falling behind in our efforts to limit our climate change, right? And it has been declared 2030 as a decade of action. What is the role of procurement, right, in reducing the scope 3 emissions?
Thank you, Sanjay. I think it's a very pertinent question, and it's not something which is limited only to India, but globally, as a community, if you look at, we are falling behind, and we are not meeting the pace of action which is required to prevent the catastrophic climate change. Now, scope 3 emissions, which are multiple times higher than the scope 1 or scope 2 emissions of a company. If I can just simplify in few words, scope 1 and 2 emissions are those emissions which are emitted by a company's own operations, and scope 3 emissions are those which are coming from the supply chain. Now, the scope 3 emissions or the supply chain is responsible for multiple times more emissions than a company. Almost up to 20 to 25 times more emissions are coming from supply chain. So if an organization is only reducing the scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, which are coming from fuel consumption in the factories, in the warehouse or distribution centers, electricity consumption, and other areas, it will only address a very small fraction of the overall carbon emission of its footprint. And that's where procurement's role becomes extremely, extremely crucial. Procurement is the function or the department which is connected with the upstream suppliers. And it is us who can influence the suppliers, who can ask the suppliers or engage them and ask them to take actions on climate change. Now, if we look at, and also, if we do not engage our suppliers or scope 3 emissions, then we cannot make any significant action, significant improvement on the climate action. And recognizing this need, Schneider launched a massive program in the month of April last year to engage and onboard more than 1,000 suppliers globally and reduce the cumulative scope 1 and scope 2 emissions of our suppliers, which is our scope 3, by 50% by 2025. And this was the zero carbon project, which was launched by the executive leadership of Schneider. Now, the interesting thing is that this program is part of the overall ambition of Schneider of operating a net zero carbon emission supply chain by 2050, which means by 2050, none of the factories, none of the transportation, none of the suppliers up to tier 1, tier 2, up to the mines or tier X will be using any fossil fuel or will only be using clean energy or renewable energy to run their operations. Now, this is an ambitious challenge that the company has taken, and we cannot do this transformation overnight. So we have to have a step-by-step, a gradual approach towards this. And in this, the zero carbon project is the first step for the first 5 years that we are engaging our partners on. Now, the interesting thing is that when we engaged and onboarded our partners on decarbonization on this journey, we also did a maturity assessment of our suppliers to understand at which stage of decarbonization they are. How much effort will it take them to reduce their carbon emissions? And we realized that more than 70% or even up to 75% suppliers are at the beginner stage, where even the discussions about carbon emissions is happening for the first time. And that was a huge challenge for us because this would require an extremely heavy lifting of our partners, extreme engagement with our business partners to make sure they understand what the emissions are, how these emissions are calculated, what kind of actions are required for reducing the emissions, and then they implement it within their own organizations to meet these requirements. And they do so within a limited time frame because we don't have unlimited number of years to tackle climate change. And to support our partners and our suppliers in this endeavor, we deployed an extensive supplier support framework to handhold them, to train them, to speed up their journey of decarbonization. And this framework comprises of 4 quadrants. So the first element of this framework is training, extensive training. Last year, we conducted 8 technical training sessions across multiple geographies, time zones, and language proficiencies, pulling in experts, from within different functions of Schneider to explain to our partners what is decarbonization, why it's needed, what have we done, because Schneider in the last 4 years has reduced 59% of its own scope 1 and scope 2 emissions. So sharing our own experience and journey with our partners and suppliers to say that, hey, this is possible, we have implemented it, and this is how you move forward in this direction. Another thing that we did was we received a lot of positive feedback from the suppliers, but then some came back and said that, hey, it's great, we get a big picture, but we still need micro handholding of how to take the first step, how to do the calculations, what are the sources of, what is scope 1, scope 2, we need more clarity on that. So to address that issue, we started conducting training sessions for our suppliers on the topic of calculating the carbon footprint. How do you calculate? How do you collect the data? What are the sources, in your company? Which are the departments? What kind of data is correct? What is not correct? What are the emission factors? How you do the calculations? How you do the quantification, etc. And we conduct weekly 2 sessions on an ongoing basis, and so far we have conducted almost close to 30 sessions with our suppliers. Another kind of training that it's not a training but rather a peer-to-peer learning that we initiated and implemented was to create a safe space of our partners and have a session of peer-to-peer learning experience sharing. And we called in the organizations or our partners who were leaders in this domain to share their experience with the wider audience. And in that respect, we had experts from Schneider, we had experts from Enkel, the German chemical company, we had experts from ArcelorMittal, who shared their global decarbonization approach, plan, going granular into what are the actions which work well, what doesn't work well, what kind of tools are required, which give you a visibility on making informed decisions. So all of these basically comprise the ecosystem of multiple varieties of trainings which are currently extended and are available for our suppliers. So that's one part of the framework that we have implemented to make sure our suppliers get a head start in this journey. The second quadrant takes care of, let's say, the self-help mode. So we have developed dedicated web portals which are available exclusively for our participating suppliers. They contain multiple trainings on the topic, thought leadership, the new research which is going on decarbonization, etc. And it makes all those information available to the partners around the clock so that they can access these at whatever time, at whatever space they need, and they can move forward with their actions. We are also working to include premium content into this web portal, but that is something which is in plan for the second half of the year.
Yeah.
And the third quadrant, what we look at is essentially on making sure the expertise that is within Schneider, it's made available to our suppliers so they can reach out to our experts to understand how the transition comes about, what are the low carbon options available. If you are going for renewables, is capex the only way, or you can have energy as service, with no capex in your books, which is a much more financially feasible option. So we have these experts within Schneider who make their expertise available to our partners and suppliers. And finally, the fourth quadrant that we focus on is basically developing customized solutions. So we not only limit to within Schneider, but we even search for incentives which are present around the world. Recently we are exploring an engagement with government of Singapore, one of their departments, to make sure our suppliers get the needed support for speeding up their transition towards low carbon operations. We have partnered with CDP to make sure the trainings and the resources that CDP has can be made available to the partners around the world. And we are even currently working on sustainable supply chain finance to make sure some of the finance related requirements, when they are going for decarbonization, can be met and addressed. And all of this effort, I would say the linchpin of this has been our procurement colleagues, the buyers,
Yeah.
the purchasers, who are tirelessly engaging with our suppliers, making the connect, giving them the confidence that yes, they can proceed and move on this journey with Schneider as a strong partner for them and supporting them. And as a result of all this, I'm happy to share that in just 1 year or less than a year, by end of last year in December, we achieved 5% emission reduction by 11% of the participating suppliers. So I guess we need to engage, we need to support, and we need to be there for our partners to make sure that supply chain scope 3 emissions are a part of the decarbonization. Otherwise, we're going to miss out our targets, our efforts by a huge margin. Supply chain
Perfect.
procurement brings a very strong multiplier effect, and by one action of procurement, we can reach out to hundreds and thousands of suppliers. So we need to
Perfect.
capitalize upon that, and we need to leverage upon that.
Well said, Kanesh. And you talked about the four elements, and I was writing them. You talked about training, you talked about self-help, you talked about information sharing, best practices, and then customized solution. And you talked about collaborative partnership with suppliers. So you talked about ecosystems, and I would like to bring Peter onto the screen. And Peter, you started saying in your first question was ecosystem, and Kanesh just actually touched base on a much wider aspect of the ecosystem just now. So thinking all this and putting together the training manuals, right, the ecosystem, the compliance that you need to have with different countries and sites. How do you do as a procurement person, right, to develop ethical sourcing strategies if you have a massive scope? Is there an SOP available, or is it something that the procurement function needs to write? What's your thought on that?
Well, I wish there were a standard SOP, okay, but unfortunately, there's no one standard SOP, so to speak. And the reason being that if you look at it today, most of our suppliers, okay, are mostly a wide range, ranging from multinational companies to SMEs to mom and pop shops within the country and local regions and local countries. So they are at various levels of maturity, various levels of capability, and also for the fact that this area of ethical and sustainable sourcing, the scope of it is very large. It has been very wide. Like what within the four speakers alone, you hear about carbon emission, you hear about climate change, you hear about deforestation to some extent, and then and there are in other areas of fields, they're also including things like human rights abuses, forced labors, child slavery, and so on and so forth. So the topics of ethical and responsible focus can be very wide, and it ranges on company and industry that you're in. As such, there's no one fixed SOP, so to speak. But all I can say is that what is really important for it to be successful, and as what Kanesh earlier mentioned, is to be a top-down approach from the leaders of the company, setting an example, to say that no, this is what they view the company should be doing. Taking the cue from not only within the leadership of the company, but also taking the cue from the customer requirements. Some customer actually mandate that you do certain things in the area of ethical and responsible. So you take the cue from there to deliver what the customer expects of you. At the same time, also take leadership to show to the customer that you also are doing it as your own initiative. All right, and to do that through different forms, I would say, echoing what Kanesh had earlier on highlighted, you have to start off very basic first, because the range of suppliers maturity is very wide. I think you start off with general awareness, creating awareness. What is your program all about? What is your scope of your program? What's important to your company, and how is it important to your company and to your supply base? You need to emphasize whether is it climate change, whether it's deforestation, or whether is it decarbonization, or whichever topics that you choose, and then you have to prioritize accordingly. You can't really tackle all at once. It's too wide. So you have to tackle a range of topics that's very important to you, and you create awareness around it. You provide training. You provide. I like what the example where they have e-portals. Where the portal training for the suppliers, which I think is a good thing to share. You provide guidance. You need to handhold your supplier through a process, and the process cannot be straight away from level 1, basic level, to advanced level. You have to go through learn how to crawl first before you walk, learn how to walk first before you run. So you have to go through various step of process, baby steps, and then to walking steps, and then to to being then you're able to then measure and be comfortable to do as well. So you have to learn how to go through those steps. You need to be guided. You need to be handheld, preferably from the from the main company itself, providing those services to the suppliers. And then you need to also put in a monitoring, implementation, monitoring, and assessment methodology. And again, you can't do this for your 50,000 suppliers, for example, in Schneider. It'll be too massive a task and too costly a task. So you probably have to target on what is critical suppliers to you that has high impact for you, and what is the most impactful, meaning in terms of the impact to you as an organization that will deliver the results that you like to see. So you can't do this equally across the board, but you have to segment your supply base and then work on different segmentation with different implementation. In order to roll it out in a level 1 basic level, moving on to a next level or intermediate, and then advanced. All right, so I think these are the few areas that needs to be looked at in a different way. There is no one solution fits all. Every company will have to find its own approach on what makes sense for them, economic wise and returns on investment wise.
Fantastic, Peter. Crawl before you walk, and walk before you run. So monitoring and
Sanjay, if I
assessment
can,
methodology.
Sanjay, if I can just compliment and
Of
comment on what
course,
Peter made, I think I completely agree with him. We cannot have a one size fits all approach. We have to customize it according to the need of the suppliers. We have to segment it, and we have to take a gradual approach. We have to take the segments of our partners, segment of our suppliers, which are much more critical initially, engage them, chart a path for their journey. How will they move from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3, and then we graduate and evolve to extend the coverage to the other segments which are available. So I think I completely resonate the point that Peter made.
excellent. And Kanish, I like that view that you brought in, right? And I was just about to say the point that you made about teaching, right? About learning, about transferring the learning, about the best practices. And going back to Peter's point, Peter, you come from a different industry. And Peter, you have done a lot, right, in terms of ecosystem, in terms of sustainability in your life, even as a consultant that you were there 5 years back. Now, considering what you work today with with Cushman and Wakefield, where you have a lot of partners that you work with, you don't have a lot of ownership on their supply chain and procurement. So, just taking the segregation of your suppliers as the next step, as you mentioned, how would a B2B environment versus a B2C environment, that segregation strategy would work? How should a procurement professional take into consideration? I know this is a very on the fly question, Peter.
This is not only on the fly, it's a very tough question. I don't have an answer for that, unfortunately. But all I can do is I share certain experience. A B2B kind of environment tends to be a bit tricky because, again, when you're dealing with business to business, where someone is supply based, it doesn't really come under your control and purview per se, unlike where you are doing your manufacturing and you have your suppliers directly under your control. So I guess the best way to look at it is to take the cue from the top management leadership to understand, if this is important for the company, an important aspect that is needing to make the company, to deliver a unique selling proposition for the company and its important clients. Then, we then go and approach it from a strategic point of view, how to then roll it out within the company, and then within the supply base, and then within the open ecosystem throughout. So it's not only within the company with the customers, within the company, and then with the suppliers. So it's a whole
Exactly.
ecosystem, entire supply chain for the customer, internal,
Yeah.
and then to the supply base. All right.
Fantastic,
What
Peter.
So, if we have a little bit of time, if you don't mind, I'd like to share. I found some recent survey results done by a survey company that was recently done late last year. And I thought it's quite interesting to share some of the findings in that survey. This is, I'm purely cutting and pasting out the
Sure.
results from this particular survey. So let me qualify: if none of this work is mine, let me qualify
Sure.
that. But I thought it was very interesting to share some of the statistics that I
Yeah.
thought
Please bring on
it
screen.
might be.
Yeah. Please bring on
So,
screen.
okay.
Akash.
So let me just share the slides if you can. Can you see it right
Yeah.
now?
Of course we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Uh, if you see what the slides that I'm sharing right now, okay. So I like to put in the question. This is done by an open text survey, by the way, right? And this survey was done late last year, which is fairly recent, in the tail end of the pandemic kind of situation. Where countries are feeling slightly better and feeling good about trying to open up, and kind of thing. So it's done over 27,000 respondents around the globe, and over the many countries, which include UK, Germany, France, Spain, Italy, India, Australia, and Singapore. All right. So this is what's interesting is that the survey found shows the importance of corporate ethical sourcing. All right. So 83% or close to 9 out of 10 global consumers give priority to buy from brands and companies that have ethical sourcing strategies in place. So there's a push here. Here is your customer telling you, hey, I'm looking at this now. All right. Second, 10% of it increased overall before the pandemic for the ethical sourcing being important. Okay, so people are getting more aware. They got more time to read and more time to explore into the needs for ethical sourcing, and things like that. Third is that you see Gen Z and millennials are leading this drive, okay, driving the change of ethical sourcing. Okay, so this is another interesting point. And last but not least, product origin. It's also important as people begin to find that you want to know where your product comes from, where raw materials come from, and are they of ethical source, and so on and so forth. From there, I'd like to also share three main questions that the survey, three questions out of the whole survey, which I thought was interesting. Question number one: when shopping after a pandemic, do you plan to prioritize buying from companies that make it clear that they have ethical sourcing strategies in place? The results, as you can see across all the countries here, it shows that across all markets, we are seeing 75% of consumers are in agreement. Okay, they're in agreement of this. That means they will prioritize where you have companies that has make it clear of ethical sourcing in place. Okay, next, do you think online retailers should clearly mark whether or not their products are ethically sourced where they can? Interesting again, because online, during pandemic situation, everybody's working from home, everybody's buying online. So the results show globally, again, 85% of the retailers should clearly, the people feel that 85% retailers should clearly mark their products are ethically sourced or not. Right. Last but not least, the last question: do you agree that organizations cannot monitor where goods come from and don't know where the suppliers are being sourced from should rethink their supply chain? This is interesting as well. And here the results show globally 60%. So I thought these findings of this report, again, let me qualify. This report is done by opentext.com. Through 27,000 respondents. All these, I'm just reporting their findings and just taking out some of their findings, and I thought this was interesting to share because I thought this is a very recent report and it shows a very change in the dimension of thinking process as what we saw 5 years, 10 years ago. These are very recent, just last year. That's all I have.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic, Peter. Just asking this question: are you open to share this with our delegates so they can check with Celerity and when we can pass on this information, since this is on open domain?
Sure. I'll share the link to the report, and like I said, this is a public kind of a survey. So these are there. This is not a report done by me. I qualify it's a report done by OpenText.
Very good, very good. And taking that point forward, right? Let's get Ashwin onto the screen. Ashwin has been sitting very calmly, right? So Ashwin, we touched base a lot of areas, right? Starting from ecosystems into training, into best practices, and one of the surveys that we saw also, right, brings in a lot of benefits. And the new millennials, right, in fact the X generation, the Z generation, and the Alpha are very strategically sensitive for sustainability and green revolution. So taking that as the next customers to shine in the next 10-15 years, the next way of the customers, let's look at it. Are there any quantifiable benefits for me as a consumer, right, of being sustainable and ethical sourcing player? And these benefits are applicable to whom? To customers, to the buyer, or to the seller?
Yeah, I think Peter shared those slides and they're very insightful. So, if we look at quantifiable benefits when it comes to, I would say, ethical, sustainable sourcing in the supply chain and its final
Yeah.
impact on the consumer, I would say I would look at it in three perspectives. One would, of course, be the consumer. I would look at the employees also from a perspective, and then the final shareholders. Now, Peter, I think, sufficiently explained from a consumer perspective. One of the points which was probably in my mind and which reflected in that first slide was the premiumness of sustainability in general. Because a lot of times I hear pushback from certain innovators in the field, certain startups who are trying to do something innovative, and they're saying, this is something sustainable, but this costs like 10% more. But then my question back to them always is, but have you found out if the consumer is also willing to pay 20% more for this? I think that is very important. And that's where I would say a lot of startups which are actually coming up with innovative ideas should not be bogged down, because in many cases we are seeing consumers who are actually willing to pay premium also for sustainable brands. So that's probably one aspect of it. And second one, employees. Now, why do I say that? We see it constantly in all of our internal surveys, all of the great place to work surveys, and its outcome that we get to see and understand is that our own employees are, number one, specifically calling out their happiness or their positive association with better world or sustainability initiatives that we are doing. But I would say more importantly, are also in those surveys calling out a lot more ideas on what we can do. And so that is literally a quantifiable metric that we see internally in terms of our own employee engagement, which is literally, when I'm talking about the employee engagement score, I'm talking about an audience which is also our consumer, which is the Gen Zs and the millennials. So we see sort of an internal validation also of it, of people accepting it, wanting more of it. So that's
Yeah.
probably the employee consumer side. The third and the most interesting side, and that I would say which we have seen grow the most in the last 5 to 6 years, is the shareholder perspective. Now, why is this important? Like, similar to the survey that Peter shared right now, from a consumer perspective, there are now dozens of surveys which are showing investors willing to pay more for companies also which are sustainable, stocks which are being rated much
Yes.
better on stock exchanges, for companies which are authentically reporting, which are having the proper disclosures in place, having the right actions in place. And just one mirror for that, in our own organization, for the Asia zone or the Asia Pacific zone, of which India is a part of us, we have actually taken a $500 million loan. The interest rate of which is completely connected to our ESG performance. So it's literally as simple as, the better our ESG performance, the better the lower the interest on that would be for us. So it's
Yeah.
actually incentivizing, again, not just the sustainability team, but the entire ecosystem to help deliver on those ESG and sustainability metrics. So that's literally something quantifiable in terms of P&L impact also that we are seeing in front of us. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I would say these are a few ways we can look at it, and now the quantifiable impact is embedded, right? And
Exactly.
please note, I did not at all talk about the greenhouse gas emission reduction related benefits, the cost saving
Yeah.
related benefits. All of that is completely separate. That's the most evident part.
Exactly.
There are
Exactly.
these
That's
other
the
things
most.
also.
Yeah, that's the most evident part. And you brought in such a wonderful element of the the benefits of sustainability are not only quantifiable at every level, but in your organization has gone one step ahead and said, you know what, since these are quantifiable, let's measure them and let's remunerate our own employees, our own team, if they're doing very well. So take the
Yes.
cartel ahead, which is fantastic, right? Now bringing Vinay back onto the screen. And Vinay, as I always say, right, tire is one commodity where there is an amazing amount of friction, either metaphorically or reality, right, on the ground. So in your case, in Bridgestone case, do end users and customers really care that Bridgestone is really an ethical organization? And it is indeed a sustainable and ethical in their sourcing strategy. So does it necessarily reflect in your top line and bottom line, or especially when you go to Nasdaq, do you get any kind of a preferential awards that this is one of the best companies to work for from ethical sourcing and sustainable perspective?
Yeah, thank you, Sanjay, and apologies for the inconvenience. I had some technical glitch. I've changed the device right now. So, to answer your question, we have to see it from multiple perspectives, from the
Yes.
customer perspective and from the stakeholder perspective. And if I talk about the stakeholder perspective or management perspective, the answer is empathetic. Yes, everybody is aligned. In fact, Bridgestone has gone ahead and now we are calling ourselves as sustainable solution company. So sustainability is something which is at the core of the operations and the strategy. If I talk about the consumers, and that is where I slightly disagree with some of the panelists, what they mentioned. So question is whether it will hit the bottom line or the top line. So to hit the top line, if your cost is going up, your price should go up. Then you will have the top line increase without hitting the bottom line. Or if you can't increase the price, will your volumes go up sufficiently enough to reduce your fixed cost and thereby giving you a better bottom line, or a combination of these things? And as Ashwin mentioned also, it's not very easy to say yes or no, because there are shades of gray. There are different levels of maturity of people, different level of evolution of countries, and their perspectives are different. So coming to the Indian perspective, if I can take the example of, say, Amazon Great Indian Festival period, we find they sold $4 billion in that period, while their annual sale was $13 billion. So 30% of their sale is coming from that segment of offer which they are offering during the festival. That means the price sensitivity of the customer is still very, very high. So the people who are there, who are aware, who are mature, do they add up to the level of scale where companies can go and invest and charge premium? There is something which is a question mark. In fact, we also have some products which are fuel efficient, but the wear life is less, and they are not selling to the extent just because the awareness is not there, because the price is high, though eventually the value of the money is much better using those kind of products. So the question here is, should we discard sustainability, and or should the companies pursue sustainability? And the answer is yes. And what is the reason? Because sustainability is about existence. If you are not working on sustainability, your existence will be under threat. Take, for example, the electric vehicles. We all know that Tesla is the number one automotive company in the world in a very short span of time. Had the other companies not invested in electric vehicles, they would be looking at a very bleak future if they had only stayed with the IC engine. So though, yeah, the cost of electric vehicle was high, yet people continue to invest in electric vehicles, and the future is of electric and renewable energy itself. Similarly, if you take example of solar energy, initially the solar energy was much expensive, yet investment kept going into this, innovation went into it, and eventually today the cost of solar energy is much lower than the fossil fuel or coal energy.
Okay.
And the question is, why is this happening? The answer is very simple. We have 195 leaders of the world coming together and sitting together and stating that we will reduce our NDCs by a so-and-so volume. Why is that happening? It's simply unbelievable. 195 people coming together and agreeing on one agenda, which generally does not happen. And the result is very simple. The situation is very alarming. If we don't take action right now, it will change the paradigm. So these leaders are setting the targets, and these targets will come out in the terms of policies, in terms of framework, and people who are working on sustainability will get the definite advantage over here. So the answer is that sustainability is key to the operations. It may not reflect in short term. It will definitely reflect in the long term. So you have to continue working on sustainability and keep on innovating so that you are able to bring down the cost of operations. So the sustainability is sustainable in operations as well.
Absolutely. Vinay, well said. And yes, while revenue and profit margin, top line and bottom line, always remains a major goal for the organization. Even bigger goal is towards society, right? Towards community, towards the next generation of 100, 150 years further to us, right? That we should maintain the right balance in the climate. So great answer. Uh, Bringing Ashwin onto the screen, and Ashwin, from a barriers perspective, because Vinay just touched based a few, and then Kanishk also talked about it earlier. What are the top 2 or 3 biggest social barriers that you can talk about achieving sustainable growth in the procurement?
I would say externally, the biggest barrier would be certain sectors or categories where we are trying to bring about a change. from a sustainability and ethics perspective, and it's very unorganized. Classic example being the returnable glass bottles category that we are looking at, where when you are trying to create a full supply chain impact, you actually need buy-in from 6 to 7 different intermediary layers. So I would say, in the way those sectors are organized, that is one very clear challenge that we are facing. The other one, if I look internally, and I think it's time for us also to be a bit more introspective and skeptical, it's also the traditional procurement mindset, right? We understand we are progressing, and we understand in the last 1 decade itself we have progressed a lot. But I think somewhere the more we have to make the supply chain sustainable and ethical, the less we have to start thinking of just from a cost control mindset, but actually start looking at it from a cost optimization mindset. Start looking at how procurement as a function can also value add to increasing the net revenue. And I really like the point Vinay just made before, right? Are your volumes also increasing to a certain level through a certain really nice, sustainable, and ethically sourced product, which will lead to your per hectoliter or per unit cost also going down. So I think within procurement, getting that larger business case commercial concept to actually embed
Mm,
and sell these cases much better within the business, that will really help. I would say that would be an internal social mental barrier in that sense within
yeah.
organizations that has to be transferred. And I would say, not really a barrier, but sort of an extension of what a lot of the speakers so far have talked about. I would say it's the lack of transparency in the entire supply chain right now. It could be something as simple as actually knowing what's your baseline in terms of scope 1 to 3 emission. And Kanish covered this uh, in his answer that he was giving. This is something which we have also started doing now in terms of, and this is the first year where we're kickstarting it, which is actually doing a supplier carbon baseline assessment. And we want to probably take the full year to do the first pilot of it, because we realize it's not something which can happen overnight. So I would say covering and jumping over that data barrier which exists right now, of actually knowing what your baseline is, so that then your interventions can be addressed accordingly. Those would be the few points which will stand out for me, Sanjay.
Excellent. And I like those two, three barriers. And one of the quick, brief element or a comment from you I require is how much education and language plays a part in that? Very brief comment on that, Ashwin.
That's I have a live example for it. So we were trying to create more transparency in our returnable glass bottle supply chain. We created this really nice application with bunch of really intelligent startup participants. It was all in English and also in Hindi. But then we realized we have to do the pilot in South India. So at some level, I think the way we are also looking at transparency through digitization will need to embed multiple languages within it. So I would say that would be one thing which was an important learning for us, which stood out for us. And the other thing, of course, would be for a lot of us MNCs, right? We have really strong global guidelines. We have really strong global SOPs. But a lot of time they just get embedded into a contract in that same English language, which I don't know how many of the suppliers, as an addendum to that agreement, would really understand fully the scope of what is being talked about there when it comes to certain responsible sourcing practices. So again, very valid question there, Sanjay. And I think more and more these languages of different global best practices which exist have to be customized. That's the only way forward now.
I think I can
Excellent.
just add a comment, complementing what Ashwin said. I think language and communication is an extremely, extremely important aspect that we need to take care of whenever we are engaging in any part of our communication engagement with suppliers. Uh, when we look at our supply base, it's spread across multiple geographies. We have suppliers in East Asia, in Europe, in an American region, and there is a very strong localization, let's say, when it comes to the language. Maybe the key contact of a supplier will understand English, they would be proficient with the systems and processes, but you
Yeah.
can't really make, yeah, the supplier engage wholeheartedly by just one key account manager from their side. The organization and the people in the supplier organization also need to understand the gravity, the seriousness, and the issues that we are talking about. And that's where having a local language becomes extremely crucial. Otherwise, all the good messaging that we are trying to communicate will simply flow from the top without having any impact or without getting absorbed in the organizations.
Perfect. And I completely support that comment, Kanish, very well. Getting Peter onto the screen and very quickly, Peter, we talk a lot about circular supply chain, right? And across a much wider spectrum, we talk about a lot of ownership on product management team, right? When you define new products, have a circular supply chain in place, let product management, marketing, and supply chain work together. But realistically, how easy it is to transform your supply chain or your value chain from a linear to actually circular? Any quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is one of the interesting new thinking process that a lot of companies are beginning to explore. Typically looking at it from a linear perspective, again, can be fairly complex as we all have experienced through. We're not just talking about supply chain within a certain geographies or region or industry, but we're talking about literally supply chains across industry. And right now, there's a new terminology. We're talking about supply web. Not just a chain as in linear, but web. As in the whole ecosystem. So, looking at it from a supply web, that means it's not just one supplier, but supplier, and so on and so forth, right?
Yes.
So that tend to be quite a massive kind of network that may be quite challenging. But looking at it from a circular economy space and circular approach, primarily essentially what it shares with you is that we're looking at it to say, okay, can we then look at things around that you can know practice the in a very basic form, practice the 3 R's, where you can reduce, reuse, and recycle. All right.
Yeah.
Any of the current inputs that goes into the process, and whether that process can then be reused, reduced, or recycled throughout the supply chain, such that you minimize the waste element of it as well as resource. So it's not just a raw material, but also resource around it. And this resource and waste material and raw material are precious material, important materials that also could lead to decarbonization initiative and so on and so forth. So that lends it into a different level of thinking process, different level of maturity. So I would say not many companies today can really explore into this area of circular kind of supply chain. Those who can do it probably will dumbify it, make it simplify as much as possible so that it's implementable, and that they target certain specific areas. And if they're done so, great, kudos to them. And one of the areas they're looking at is actually in the area of FMCG, food, agricultural kind of products, where where this circular economy tend to be more pertinent than in the other industries per se.
Perfect. Thank you, Peter. Kanish, talking about taking that one step ahead again in terms of the triple bottom line, right? And it's a huge subject, I know, but just addressing those critical areas, right? It is called a sustainable model for the success of future, right, of India as well as other industries. Can you talk through a couple of those elements very briefly?
Absolutely, Sanjay. And it's ironic that this question still comes into discussions, although a little less now, but still it comes. And our experience has been very clear that companies who follow responsible business practices, they definitely perform better than the companies who do not. In
Yes.
fact, Ashwin also touched upon that point in his intervention earlier, and this point has also been resonated by various rating agencies in the studies that they have done, and there are reputed ones at that. And in my humble opinion, there are reasons for that. The first one is we need to look at sustainability as a measure of improving our bottom line. If
Yes.
we ask the question at the very basic fundamental level, what is sustainability? It's all about efficiency, efficient use of resources, efficient use of raw materials, efficient use of energy, water, reducing the waste, switching from conventional carbon intensive sources to newer sources which require innovation, pushing the boundaries. And of course, you need to be strategic, go about in a planned way. But all these actions, when implemented and done in a right way, actually give you positive returns. And if we talk about our own experience, we have currently more than 50 facilities globally by the end of last year who are completely operating on clean fuels. They have completely
Clean fuels.
phased out the fossil fuel. And there have been discussions on the investments required, what kind of approach should we adopt, etc., etc. But I'm happy to share that in none of the instances our financial considerations have gone beyond what the regular financial rate of returns we consider. So these
Yeah,
discussions are actually at the heart of it. The sane and sound financial decisions that companies have to make. The second quick point is, why it's a sustainable model of success, and if you don't
yeah,
do that, you face a risk, is because the global regulatory environment has changed drastically over the last 10 years or so. If you look at, almost 10 to 15 global regulations have been launched by different countries,
yeah.
which make the global corporations who are operating global supply chains responsible for the actions of their suppliers, of their value chain, etc. And they ask us to do the due diligence of the environmental impact, of the social impact, of various kinds of malpractices which are happening, and report on in public space, what are the hotspots, what are we doing to address them. And in many
Yeah,
cases, countries like Sweden, Finland, they are linking these kind of disclosures to the financial instruments, or financial incentives that they're offering. So there's a huge regulatory shift, which is making sustainability as a baseline now for procurement operations. The last
fantastic.
point which I would want to mention is early adaptation. You know, keeping sustainability lens helps the leadership take a long-term horizon in decision making. Having a strategic level, it helps identifies the future trends early on, which may either pose a risk or an opportunity. And basically, you start working on it much faster, much early on, giving you a much longer lead time to develop solutions, innovate, and be ready whenever the train hits the wall. So
Fantastic.
basically, keeping this lens makes you much better prepared, helps you in horizon scanning for your organization, and be there, with the right kind of tools, right kind of approaches to respond to these challenges when they hit. And I completely agree. This is definitely a sustainable model for success.
Fantastic, fantastic, and I like the way you talked about the international, and then you brought a financial element. So let us get Vinay. I have a question, right, coming from the audience, and Vinay, I would like to pose this question to you. This is about COP26, right, about the climate finance, which was an interesting development. Can you just address a couple of elements about what is climate finance, which was addressed in the COP26 convention?
Yeah, Sanjay. So that's a very interesting question. And COP26, so let me tell the audience over here that every year we have this assembly of leaders, and which we call as the Confederation of Parties. And this was 26th meeting which took place. Now, before this, an important meeting took place in 2015, which was COP21, and which is also known as Paris Agreement.
Yeah,
And there they realized that whatever the NDCs which have been proposed by the respective governments, if they abide by those NDCs, the climate temperature will increase by more than 2.7 degrees. As of now, the temperature increase is 1.3 degrees. And the target is to have it well below 2 degrees, and ideally target is to have at 1.5 degrees.
yes,
So that is the whole thing about why we need to be so aggressive in our approach towards sustainability, towards climate finance. Now the question is, how do we achieve those finance? And there the principle was common but differentiated responsibility and respective capability. So it is a well-known fact that since the Industrial Revolution, the developed countries have contributed significantly towards the greenhouse emissions, and thereby they own the major responsibility.
yeah,
Also, they have a significant capability to finance because of their status of affairs. And the developing countries or the small island nations, they would require that support in terms of finance to work on the sustainability models. As a consequence, in the Paris Agreement, it was decided that the developed countries will contribute $100 billion per year, which they could not do it. They were able to reach up to 70, $80 billion. So that commitment has been reiterated. That they will contribute $100 billion, and still the discussion is going on to refine tune that figure, and which will subsequently come to us in the next COP27 meeting.
Fantastic.
Here it is also worthwhile to also note that though they could not contribute $100 billion, but when we had 3 storms in USA, the US government had to invest $256 billion to recover from that situation. Also,
Yeah.
also there is a study which says that in 15 years post-Paris Agreement, we will have to invest $90 trillion for the infrastructure to control the climate change. $90
Yeah.
trillion means approximately $6 trillion per year. And
Yeah.
no government in any world can contribute that kind of amount of finance.
Sure.
As a consequence, the government, the private companies, individuals, everybody have to contribute to this mission of controlling climate control.
Thank you. And Vinay, that was a wonderful statistics. Guys, we're almost like 1 minute. We need to hand over to Charu back. But before I do that, I want to ask one question to all the delegates, and your time is like 30 seconds, right? And what is your message today to our audience, right, of what we talked as the key message? Less than 30 seconds, a single line, starting with Ashwin.
I would say my single line here would be we have to stop thinking that sustainability is something which the sustainability team does, and we have to embed it within the organization, engage
Yes.
your employees more, your shareholders more, your consumers more, and talk about it at the top of your voice, right? I think that's also very important, not just silently doing it in a corner, talking about
Yes.
it, making people learn from those successes. So that would be my message to everyone.
Fantastic, Ashwin. I like that. Kanishk.
Absolutely. I mean, resonate what Ashwin said, but adding on, think of sustainability as a transformation measure for your organization because you constantly need to innovate, update, and respond to the trends, which are happening in our operating environment. You can't stay static. These are way too powerful trends to, ignore them. So treat it as a transformation and just go with it.
Yeah, trade is a transformation. Fantastic message. Vinay.
Yeah, my message would be sustainability is an opportunity. Go grab it.
Opportunity, go grab it. Fabulous. Peter.
Thanks. Okay. Good, Vinay, short and sweet. Well, my one liner would be more like to say that start the leadership thinking about sustainable and ethical sourcing. Don't wait till the customers come after you, because once the customer have stipulated with you, then you are chasing. You're already behind the 8 ball. So start it off first. It's okay to start small. Again, echoing what I said earlier on. Learn to crawl before you walk, and learn to walk before you run. Okay, all right. So start small, incremental steps, but have something in place so that when your customers actually do come to you, you say, okay, we have started something. We'd like to learn from you to grow with you into the various stages of development. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Excellent and great message today, guys. So thank you so much, Ashwin. Thank you, Kanish. Thank you, Vinay and Peter, for such a wonderful discussion. Thank you, all my delegates. Sorry for the trouble in the beginning on the technical issues, but I would hand it over back to Charu. Over to you, Charu. Thank you so much.
You're mute, Charu.
Right, right. Thank you. So, thank you, Ashwin, Kanishk, Vinay, and Peter, for your wonderful thoughts, practical ideas, and this interactive panel. Thank you, Sanjay ji. The discussion was very, very lively as usual, and it was very wonderful. This webinar will remain on LinkedIn and YouTube in case people want to come back to it again. We will also be publishing or transcribing this webinar in the form of a cover story in our next issue, which is going to be in May, June. So those who have missed the webinar would also be able to read it in the magazine. So thank you, panelists. Thank you for making time. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank
Namaskar,
you.
everybody. Good
Thank
evening.
you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
So, without further ado, we are moving on to our next panel on digitization and automation in procurement. This panel will discuss the various pieces of digitization and digitalization, their effective implementation, which is both cost effective, fast, and brings in resilience. It's my pleasure to welcome the panel. Please put your hands together for Mr. Derek Lee, Mr. Jaswinder Saini, Mr. Saurabh Palsania, and Ms. Tanisha Ganguly. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
To start this panel,
Hello.
I would first ask Derek to start with the introductions.
Sure. Hi,
So,
good afternoon,
Derek,
everyone.
quickly introduce yourself.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Derek Lee, Vice President of Pharma and Healthcare for Jazz Worldwide. My procurement experience actually spans from my couple of previous roles where I was head of procurement for North Asia for Zurich Pharma, and I've also been a consultant with SAP Ariba, managing the digital transformation team out of Greater China. So pleasure to be here, and I look forward to an interesting exchange with everyone.
Please introduce yourself.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I am Jaswinder. I am part of Tata Play, which was earlier known as Tata Sky. I had the procurement for Tata Play, and I also had procurement for Tata Play Fiber, which is the broadband business. I have been into procurement for last 25 years, and I have been. I started my career with automobile, which is Daewoo Motors. Then I worked with LG Electronics, moved to Vodafone, then to Reliance Broadcast, and now I'm working with Tata Play.
Thank you, Jaswinder. Saurabh, if you could quickly introduce yourself.
Happy afternoon, all of you, and I'm happy to be here. I'm Saurabh Palsania and takes care of the group commercial activities of Dalmia Cement Bharat Limited and based at New Delhi. Apart from procurement, I offer store spare, raw materials, and alternate fuels for the company. I also take care of various commercial and innovations in the company in respect to logistics and and efficiency in operations. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Saurabh. Tanisha, could you please quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Charu, and a very good afternoon to everybody, my co-panelists and the audience. So I'm Tanishta. I work with Kimberly Clark. You'll probably recognize us by Huggies and Kotex brands and Kleenex brands. So I currently lead the global procurement
So, Tanisha, there's a slight issue with your network.
We have lost your voice, Tanishta.
Yes, we'll come back to Tanisha. I think we can thank you all for the quick introductions. I would like to tell the audience that we have a panel which has a very wide and deep experience. There is a person from pharma, then we have Saurabh who's from a cement industry. We have Jaswinder from telecom, while we have Tanisha who's from the consumer goods industry. So I'm sure, audience, you will enjoy the different points of view and the different ideas which will come in through this panel discussion. My first question goes to Derek and Jaswinder. Derek, all sorts of digital technologies are available. They are very much hyped. Cost is also a factor while evaluating technologies. So how does a procurement head decide on the best fit technology? So Derek, if you could answer it first.
Sure. So I would say that from a procurement head perspective on technology, what we are really looking for is value for money. What we want to do is find out, can I get the most value from the solution which we're implementing? And that comes as a total package, a total cost of ownership, meaning to say, not that I have cheap software, but a very high implementation cost, or the other way around. What I want is a software which is simple to use, may not have the full functionality, but it's what we call good enough that I can get my teams working on it and they can start getting a savings, improving efficiency. They can start placing orders quickly enough. They do not need to be working till midnight every night. And so for me, that is where I look at value for money and looking for a solution which is sufficient for the business. Naturally, it goes with the size of the business, but the most important part of it is just to make sure that what you get is able to scale from a smaller to a larger business. Or in fact, from a larger business, sometimes we look at the ability for it to shrink to a smaller business because of the M&As which happen in this world right now, that you may actually spin off a department, you may actually sell it out, you may do different things, you may want to manage it by different markets. So we want actually a lot of flexibility, efficiency, and really looking at what the total cost of that package will be in order to decide on the solution.
Right. Definitely, cost efficiency, savings, scalability, all these are now hygiene factors while evaluating technology. Very well put, Derek. I would like Jaswinder to add on to this answer, please. Jaswinder.
Yeah. So I think that while any organization they start the journey of digitization, it has to actually start with the problem statement. Every organization should check what is the problem that they are trying to address through this digital journey that they are embarking on to. That is one very important element. Second important element is it has to be aligned to the company's goal, and it has to be synced with expectation of management. So each organization has its own set of challenges, they have their own problems, and each organization has got their own ways of working, their own processes. So one set may not fit the another organization because their needs, their challenges, their problems statements will be different, and it has got many different factors. So for example, whether you are a manufacturing organization or you are in a service organization or you are into product distribution and selling, so each three segments will have a different challenges, so different tools will fit into their requirements. Similarly, whether you are a very small new startup or you are a medium scale organization or you are a very large conglomerate, so each these three organization will have different set of solutions, different set of problems, and similarly it will also depend on which sector you are working on, whether you are in automobile, telco, pharma, retail, IT, because each segment or each sector has got their own challenges. And today when we go to market, there is plethora of tools that are available. There are enormous number of organization companies, they are giving their tools and they are offering their services in multiple shapes, sizes and formats. So based on what is your problem statement or what is your company looking at, so that is what will be the deciding factor. And based on the problem statement, what is it that you want to achieve, then you can select your tool, whether you want to pick the full P2P suite, whether you want to go for some particular segment of the whole suite. Is it the onboarding process, whether it is e-bidding tool, whether it is invoicing tool, whether it is vendor empanelment that you are looking at? What is the problem, what are you addressing? Based on that, you need to pick up the tool. And of course, as Derek mentioned in the earlier, you have to be very, very cautious about the cost, and you need to be sure that whatever you are choosing should give you the returns on the investment properly. I think that's the
Right.
way how to look at it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks, Jaswinder, for making it so simple. Tanisha, I would like you to please quickly introduce yourself.
Hello, you can hear me, I hope.
Yes, Tanisha, please go ahead.
Right. Thanks, Charu. So, as I was saying, I am currently working with Kimberly Clark, and I lead the global procurement IT team. So, end-to-end global procurement teams' IT requirements, starting from their short-term or long-term IT strategy, project delivery, All this comes under my scope.
All right.
Over to
Thank
you.
you. Yeah. Thank you, Tanishta. Back to Derek. My next question goes to Derek. Derek, how does digitalization create value in procurement?
Okay, maybe I will go out on a limb here and make a very simple comment. Digitalization really solves not a procurement problem, but it solves a traceability and compliance problem. Um, by digitizing, what we have is that single source of the truth, um, and we have that ability to trace the steps, the approvers, and so on. And that, for a lot of organizations, is actually the key for digitization. Do you actually want to look at multiple pieces of paper, who signed it, question if it's a false signature, you know, not sure if there's a missing document. And that's where we have that worry about why we digitize. I feel that digitization, the most important thing, of course, is that traceability and compliance piece. Now, outside of that whole thing, there's also a whole benefit around we get knowledge sharing, the information is in one single system, we can have that information shared to different departments across the globe, and we, of course, we can start doing comparisons side by sides in a much easier way. All of that is what we used to do in paper. We have the vision about it. But between that kind of comparisons, global knowledge bases, and really being able to communicate as a team internally, and of course to extend it out to supplier networks, that's where the digitizer fits in. If I extend that to a overall supply chain network and digitization, your extended benefit is the ability to get supplier pools where you can have people, joining into a network, and you can start sourcing for suppliers. And without naming any names, there's tons of these supplier portals available where the ability to start price comparing, quality comparisons, getting feedback, all that as a holistic procurement ecosystem is what makes the digitization very powerful. So if I summarize it, you've got the internal inward-facing compliance piece, and then you've got the company to the world, or your organization to the world piece, which is bringing everyone into the same ecosystem.
Thank you, Derek, for explaining this so beautifully. So, I have an interesting question for Tanishta. Tanishta, what are the AI and ML opportunities in procurement?
So, to begin to answer this question, Charu, there are many opportunities that we have for advanced technologies today, where we can use AI, ML, or automation in procurement, right. So if I just break down certain areas for you, right, for example, spend analysis. I mean, people who are from procurement, they would agree with me when I say that spend analysis is one of the key areas where everywhere, at least in my experience so far, we struggle, right. Spend analysis is one area where AI/ML is useful. Then you have price forecasting, right, which in a way it is spend or budget forecasting for you, right. Then supplier performance management, supplier risk management, assisted search, sourcing, you name it. Every, if you break down the end-to-end S2P process, everywhere, whether it's sourcing, whether it's contracting, whether it is your P2P area, you will find opportunities to utilize the AI, ML, automation, all these new technologies that have come up, right. Supplier relationship management, when you want to do, you want to have a data driven conversation with your suppliers, and how do you get meaningful information out of the vast data that you collect from your suppliers, right. So all these are some key examples from where AI/ML today facilitates or enables the business to have more meaningful conversation from with their suppliers, for example. Yeah.
That's right, Tanishta. Like you said, the canvas has become very, very wide in its scope, and given the fact that you are in the procurement IT delivery, I think it must be like the entire day is where you would be probably plugging and playing with the technology. Uh, my next question goes to Saurabh and Jaswinder. what do you have to say about technology helping in evaluating and onboarding suppliers? How do you use technology to evaluate and onboard suppliers? Do you practice an e-bidding process? So how do you do it? And how successful has e-bidding been in your organization? So Saurabh, if you could answer first.
Yeah. So Charu, I think your question is well taken. And see, supplier onboarding, I mean, I'll say that in digitization, it is now as essential as like a mobile that you have instead of a landline phone. And whenever we talk about suppliers, we should have a visibility that who are the suppliers whom we are working with and what more can be onboarded. And for that, supplier onboarding process is must. And what are the other things what we can do with means to have a onboarding software is that we can look into the compliances of vendors, their risk management, extending existing suppliers, better data quality, self-service you can say capability in the system, and transparency and speed. So these are the 4 or 5 things what we can expect after having an onboarding software for suppliers, and this gives a visibility across the procurement team that this is the team of suppliers which we have on board, and these are their capabilities in terms of manufacturing, or you can say delivery, and how they are expanding. Sometimes when you don't have that onboarding platform, you don't know much about how your suppliers are growing. That is where you very important to know about their capabilities, growth plans, and as well as their diversification into different products. So you can increase your database. You may be having many suppliers who are supplying you X items across means for a number of years. But as you don't send them inquiries, as you don't know their expansion plans or their growth plans and what they have grown into today. So supplier onboarding is, a software, or you can say a type of digitization that one should start with when they think of digitization.
Thank you, Saurabh. Can we now, Jaswinder, could you just add on to this? How has
Yeah.
e-bidding helped you in your sourcing and procurement?
Yeah. So I will touch upon vendor onboarding as well. So a little. So how do
Yes,
we
yes,
do it?
yes. Thank you.
So we have onboarded full P2P suite, and vendor onboarding is also part of this P2P suite. And as far as onboarding for suppliers, anybody can go to tataplay.com, and there is a tab on the bottom of it, and anybody can register themselves to be a potential partner for us. And all the information comes to us through the online tools that we have, and we do 170 checks on the partner before we actually make before we actually start working with them. And all these 170 checks that we do is in less than 2 days time. This is not possible without putting the proper technology in place. So we have got a lot of bots and lot of search engines, a lot of uh, web scraping tools which are working behind it, and which pulls out entire information about the partner from various platforms available across the internet. So that is one on the vendor onboarding part. We have a well defined process for entire procurement, and as per that, uh, we anything which is above 2 lakh worth of procurement, and which is not regulatory, statutory, rental, and proprietary type of category, which is to be negotiated, has to be mandatorily go through e-bidding as a process. So that's the policy, and we adhere to this policy to the T. And every day we run roughly around 8 to 10 e-biddings. And I feel that this has been very successful for us because it brought in 4 important uh, success elements to the whole process of procurement. First one is it delivers huge savings. At sometime it surprises even me that, oh, if I would have done this, I could have closed it at much higher price, because at times it is your limited visibility to the world, which you may miss during the manual negotiation that you may do. Second is it is super quick. I can configure e-bidding within 1 hour. It can be conducted, and you are on to the results in a couple of hours. If you have to go through a manual route of negotiation, the same negotiation can take you anything between 5 to 6 days, because you have been waiting for partners to revert on it. Then the third is it is a very transparent process. So when we do a e-bidding, so there is no grudge from the partner side that you have not done the right thing, because partners is while they are on e-bidding, they are clear that what level they are, whether they are winning or they are losing. So there is absolute transparency when the e-bidding is happening. So that bring a lot of satisfaction on the partner side. And fourth one is it is very unbiased. So whenever a manual negotiation happens, there is always a element of bias of buyer or the person who is negotiating. So those bias actually goes out when you are on the e-bidding platform. I think uh, putting these four parameters in place, we are very happy, and we are doing this activity very successfully for us.
Charu, I think I'll add to what
Yes.
Jaswinder has said. I'm
Yes,
100%
please.
aligned with what.
Yes, Saurabh. Yes.
So I'm 100% aligned in case of e-bidding, whatever is shared by Jaswinder. But apart from that, there are two more things that has helped us. See, we have got a e-auction platform, and we are practicing it since last 3 to 4 years. So biggest advantage that comes out is one is speed, and second is that our team, because in this changing scenario, which is the volatile say environment today, what we are facing since last 3 days, we could we need to get into more healthier or more say you can say activities which will bring either add the suppliers to our vendor base, or we need to explore new items which can replace the existing ones. So we need to put our workforce more on those activities which will bring more value addition to the organization. And we could, what we could do is that we could create a team of procurement excellence, taking out 3-4 persons from the team, post putting all these things to auctions, because that was taking a lot of time of those people. So we could make them free from those activities and put them on these healthier activities which can add greater value to the organization. And lastly, what we could say is that we are operating at a level of almost say 55 to 60% through auctions in a company like ours, which has got almost say 14 locations of cement units, and also almost 30 to 50 auctions per day we are conducting as of now. And we have experienced that it has given more value in terms of services part, as well as the raw material procurement also. So because you do not know what is the exact price that a service provider can give us, what is his what his pocket allows, because there is, in today's scenario, people are building up not less than 200 to 300% on the value of on the cost of the services. That has given a big leap. Auction has given us a big leap into their pocket, and definitely we could get very attractive and competitive prices through auctions.
Right, right. Extremely well said. So yes, basically, I think it's the entire angle of being able to add in more work, realigning teams to probably be more productive because of use of e-bidding and supplier onboarding. I think that's been very important. And for Jaswinder, as Jaswinder mentioned, that they have some 170 parameters to look at before they onboard a supplier. So having been to be able to do it manually would have been near impossible. So yes, point well taken, Saurabh and Jaswinder. Thank you. My next question goes to Tanishtha and Saurabh. So again, coming back to supplier management. What kind of technologies are being used and how is it playing a role in managing the end to end? So while we spoke about onboarding and e-bidding part, so the end to end supplier management is how is it helping there? So Tanisha, if you could shed some light there.
Right. So, Charu, like you said, supplier management is a big umbrella, and end to end. If I have to say how technology is using is being used in supplier management today, in each under the umbrella there are many buckets, and in each bucket you will find technology being used, whether it is out of the box or whether it is advanced technologies. Um, right from supplier onboarding to supplier risk management to supplier performance measurement to supplier performance management, the entire life cycle of a supplier once you onboard a vendor, it is today going through some tool or the other. Chances are here it's going through multiple tools and talks in between to multiple
Absolutely.
tools, right?
Yes.
And the talk or the need of the hour is that this data goes through each of the systems smoothly. That's where technology plays a big impact. um, Supplier data itself is vast. When you talk to any procurement professional, there are so many criteria that is there that comes with the suppliers, right from the onboarding phase to the entire life cycle where you are regularly having your performance measures with your suppliers, the quality checks that you are doing. All that data is taken, and it's not enough just to take data. You also have to have meaningful insights out of it, right? For example, you create reports of, let's say, on time in full reports or your quality checks reports. uh, this is where the advanced technologies or new technologies or even our standard out of the box software play a very important role in bringing out that insight from the data that you collect, right? Talk to the procurement professionals, and when they go and have their regular catch-ups or meetings or reviews with their suppliers, they do need the entire performance, how it has been happening, how the supplier has been performing year on year, a month on month, whatever the frequency is. The other area where a significant role that technology plays in bringing out these reports or insights from the data is, for the leadership team, where they are able to see where are the inefficiencies. I'll give a small example. Let's say we're talking about a KPI for the suppliers on time in full. OTIF, that is a very key KPI for suppliers. Now, when you sit and analyze, you look at how many of our key suppliers and what is their OTIF score. And then you go into the details like why is it's a key supplier and why is the OTIF so low. You go into look at into more level of details. Why is, out of all the times it has not met an OTIF, how many times was it something triggered by the supplier themselves that they wanted to, let's say, delay the date of delivery of a material, or was it from our side where we said, we don't want it on X date, we want it on Y date. Right. So these kind of analysis is needed even at our own level before we even
Right.
go and talk to our suppliers, right? Another example that I am thinking of, that especially that happens, as Jashwinder said, right, during onboarding time. How do you, when you are onboarding, you also want to know a little bit of background, a lot of background checks of your supplier, right? Or how is
Right.
their financial condition? Are they financially viable? Are they going to be financially viable in the next 1 year or
Right.
2 years of the
Right.
contract?
Right.
What is their reputation in the market, especially when some critical industries where you are looking for sustainable sourcing? How is your supplier seen in the market? What is their reputation? So all this data is something that needs to be gathered and processed. It is like you all mentioned, it is impossible to manually do this, gathering of information and then processing and bringing out insight. So I think this
Right.
is the place where these are the key areas where technologies really, be a shot in the arm, be a help, a great help for the businesses, for the teams.
Right, right. So, thank you, Tanishta. So, as Tanishta was saying, that a lot of technology is being used in checking suppliers' credentials and the suppliers' credibility, reputation. We have a question from a supplier. Mr. Srinivas, thank you for putting up that question. And Derek, the question is that a big issue that suppliers are experiencing is that technical specifications can be ambiguous, and even they feel that the way evaluation is being done is very doubtful. So, Derek, what do you have to say to that?
Okay, so I would say that I think technical specifications are quite often written with something in mind. Maybe let's use an example. For example, I want to build a warehouse and I know that I want four walls, I want white color paint, but there are some things which I don't know. For example, what will my requirements comply to the regulations? Do I need to do something which is in addition to the basics? So I use a Singapore example. Um, all fire-related hoses have to be painted red in color, and you have to mark out certain things for fire regulations. These are things which quite often a end user doesn't actually know, but the expectation is that a supplier would know all these things. So the supplier in this context has two functions. One of it is to supply the product or service, and the separate function is to act as a subject matter expert to provide intelligence and knowledge about the conditions or how we need to meet regulations. So, and I think that's where, as a supplier, there is we expect that suppliers communicate and over communicate with us to ensure that we know what we're buying, we know what you're offering, and if there's any doubts, we can actually have that conversation saying that you are telling me that you're providing this particular service, and included in that, there's probably some element of your expertise, your consultancy fees involved. Where I think we always need to have a balance is in certain projects like these, it's also usually quite often high value, and this is also the best opportunity for e-bidding. And when you have e-bidding with in not very clear technical requirements, that's a recipe for disaster in a sense that the supplier thinks one thing, the client has a different vision completely, and when the contract is awarded, the SOW is so brief that no one understands what they're going to get, because you're going to have 10 different parties who are writing different documents who have not really been communicating as well. So I would say that in that respect, you really need a lot of communication whenever there's a lack of clarity. And as a procurement person myself, I would say that it is, if you ask me for evaluation criteria, I should be able to at least give you the high level evaluation criteria. I'm not going to tell you that I will give you 3 points for this particular activity, but I can tell you that 70% is price, 30% is quality, or 30% is price, 30% is subject matter expertise, 40% is ESG, for example. And that's where I think the communication is really required between all the parties, especially if you are facing that you don't even understand the technical specifications or they're ambiguous. So Charu, I'm going to
Yes,
hand back to you and let
yes,
someone else.
absolutely.
Charuk, I would like to add
Sure.
one line
Yes,
to this.
yes, Jaswinder.
So as a partner, the amount of fear that you have in your mind related to technical specification, let me assure you, as a buyer, as a procurement professional, we are equally scared of unclear technical specification. Whenever we run a e-bidding on the back end, we always go to user teams saying that technical specification has to be clear, because if based on unclear technical specification, our entire process goes for a toss. Either we need to run a e-bidding again if specification change, or we are in threat of ending up paying much higher than the anticipated price. So as a procurement team, we are on the side of partners. We always try to get as clear specification as we can, but as Derek just mentioned, there are cases where as an organization we are not clear what are we looking at. So in those cases we definitely go ahead with maybe some partial technical specification, or we add specifications at the later stages.
Yes.
Fully agree.
Yes, Srinivas, I hope that answers your question, because for a large organization which has huge procurement spends, even they would not like to have ambiguity in their entire process, because every sourcing, every requirement that they have for partners is equally an expensive process. So, like Jaswinder said, that in case there is ambiguity, I think communication, like even Derek said, would be the best way to clear out any kind of issues that partners may have. So, Srinivas, I hope that answers your question. Moving forward, Tanishra had said that there are multiple tools which are used for multiple processes, and multiple data points are being used. With so much of data, I wanted to ask Saurabh and Derek, how is data analytics being leveraged for better management? And the different tools you have would definitely look at data in different manner. So how is the data standardization process happening in your companies? So Saurabh and Derek. So Saurabh, if you could answer this first.
Yes. So I think, Charu, this is a big, you can say, issue presently in any organization of a, I mean, who can be categorized as a large organizations. And the problem is that there is a lot of data into the system. Now, maybe that you need the right data to analyze and to get, so that the right information comes to you at right time, and you can take the right actions thereon. So now what we as an organization are doing is that we have created a data lake into the system, and through that data lake, which can collect the data of different, you can say, requirements, maybe different functions, and through that data lake we are trying to get the reports being prepared out of that data. And one is that what type of and categorizing those reports into, you can say, which is required by the top management, which is required by middle management, then by the execution team, and such. I mean, those data creation of data lake is helping us to take out the right data for the right function and right level. Post that, I think one more step what we are trying to do now is that reports, maybe say you can set up the frequency of those reports to look into it, but maybe that sometimes we are not able to look into those reports, or I mean what, and maybe that important issue, I mean, is not being highlighted to in a right time and at the right place. So for that, what we are trying to create is a pipeline where, you can say, various analysis happens, and those analysis through, you can say, AI or machine learning also, and those things are being popped up on the screen of the right person at a right time to take the step. Like, you can say, if there are certain stocks which are required to be maintained at plant level, now popping up of, say, information on the screen of the person who has to take care of those material, that this stock has gone below the reorder level, or maybe say information that I mean, which we are linking with the market, say information is that the rates of this particular material are shooting up. If you have to order aluminum, or you have to order nickel, you have to order any other material where the prices are going high, maybe oil, maybe granules, maybe. So it is being highlighted in the morning hours, maybe once, maybe at around 10, that these are the price list of various items which is increasing, just like what we see at 9:30 maybe on the screen of share market. So, yes, so this is the way we are trying to say set up certain informations. First is data lake, then certain reports set for different levels, and then for the pop-ups which require immediate attention.
Right,
Thank you.
absolutely. So imagine the kind of cost you save, when you have to look at commodity procurement in terms of nickel and aluminium, the metal
Yes.
rates which are governed by global markets.
Yes.
I would ask Derek to now add to this. So, Derek, how is data analytics being leveraged and how can it be leveraged for better management?
So for us, I think what we actually looked at was trying to get a standardized taxonomy that we can actually use to talk across the globe with multiple entities. So for us, we actually use the US NSPC code, and we align all our taxonomies to the US NSPC. With that, all our reporting is actually based on that code. And as an extension, we do have subcategories which extend the USNSPC code to get level of detail. So I think for us, transportation is a big one. So we end up breaking down into 2-ton truck, 4-ton trucks outside of just local land transportation. But I think from an analytics perspective, what we're trying to get to is, like Sarat mentioned, reporting, reorder points are extremely important, but we're also trying to go that one step further and say, can we look at what analytics and what the reports can do? Are they predictive and are they actionable? So what we are trying to get to is a point where the analytics provides us with something where we can action in time, and we're also trying to look at pulling in external data, market information to give that prediction. To give an example, if I know that like last year there was the Evergreen vessel which was stuck and blocking the Suez Canal, and after one day it should predict that my supply chain will be at risk. Should I reorder more now before prices go even further, or should I wait and pray for the best? Those will be kind of decisions where the predictive analytics would at least give an alert before we can make a decision. And so I think that's where we're trying to get to, from just analytics or post-activity reporting into actionable analytics, so that I get information far ahead enough. And of course, going the next step is the predictive analytics, where we can actually get predictions of what to do, and that AI machine learning make a recommendation. Right now, the recommendations are done by ourselves based on that information which we get. And I think a lot of it becomes the experience of the person, experience of the team. And what we're trying to get away from is trying to bring what I used to call bring back the brain, which is bring that knowledge of the people into a system which can make predictions and start learning and gaining systemic experience. So hopefully that is a bit of a sharing for everyone.
Right. Definitely, Derek. So while on-time decision making does help in taking care of crisis, but like you said, predictive analytics will definitely pave the way towards more informed and proactive decision making. It brings me to my next question again, Derek and Tanishta. I want you to give examples of using technology for a lot of these manual repetitive tasks. How can you automate them? So if you could come up with some examples there, Derek, if you could go
Sure.
first.
Yep. So the sexy one in the room is always saying that we use RPA which is robotic process automation, to manually to systemically manage invoices and so on. Which, yes, in my previous role we actually did. We had a RPA system which was reading invoices and doing GL posting. So that was actually a very efficient way of managing it. But I think where we also saw a lot of value and a lot of buy-in from staff was actually just a standard Microsoft form which they could key in themselves and which would populate into a system which would generate POs. And the POs of up to a certain value on a certain category would automatically be approved. To give quite a simple example, like stationary orders under $25 were automatically approved. So that actually got more interest from the teams and more happiness in internal engagement compared to doing RPA, which was extremely efficient, really sexy, but that only got the buy-in from the suppliers and who got paid faster, and the finance team who didn't have to work as long. The rest of the organization, which is 80% of the rest of the organization, didn't feel anything. So I think when we talk about implementing these, we need to balance the visibility. How do we make life easier for a bigger audience? At the same time, we need to work on efficiency, which is the sexy stuff like RPA and so on, to make things more efficient.
Thanks, Derek. So, Tanishta, Derek has mentioned RPA, and I'm sure there must be a lot of other technologies. What are the challenges which come upon when you're implementing such a technology, when you're trying to automate some manual processes? So, what kind of change management is required?
Firstly, Charu, I will completely agree with the point that Derek made just now, that our own teams, they get more excited even if it's a simple solution that we put in, but it is really if impacting their lives, their day-to-day work, right? The example that Derek gave, that is something very similar that we have also implemented in our company, which really eases the life of the requisitioner, right? Because that is the kind of ease at work that they really look for. And here is where I will give link it to to your question. What are the challenges that in terms of change management we find when we try to do automation? The first is to get the user buy-in. People will come, different teams, different team members will come with a lot of automation requirements, but they would also come to us with requests of, let's implement this, let's implement that, because they would have heard from the market, from our the vendor partners, that this tool is so cool, this tool does this, or very spectacular user friendly UIs, all that, and they would come to us directly with a request, implement this for us, without telling us or forgetting themselves what is the problem that they're trying to solve, right? So for us, what we normally do is go through this entire process of understanding what are their pain points, and how which technology would be the best to fit in and solve their particular problem. It is not always necessary that you need to have a fancy tool. It can be a simple automation without having a fancy expensive RPA license or AI ML being implemented. It can be a simple Excel automation as well. So getting the expectations set on automation is one thing. The second thing is uh, there is always somewhere in the back of the mind of many people that automation at a at a large scale somewhere down the line will impact my job. It is a real thought that does come, and sometimes, but for us, I think one of the it's kind of an effort that we make where we actually right play out the scope of the software or the automation that we are doing, right? I think that is one of the key aspects that as leaders, or as from a IT department, we need to do is clearly write out the scope of how much a software can do for you, and how much guidance is actually needed from the team members,
Absolutely.
right? So
Absolutely.
that balance needs to be clearly mentioned. Otherwise, the acceptance of tools may or may not be 100%. Like, you can put in a fancy tool, but you have only 10% or 20% usage. S- So these are the aspects where a lot of focus needs to go right at the beginning, where you
Right.
define the scope and the expectations are set.
Correct.
Charu,
Absolutely.
Can I
Sure,
put here
please.
one point?
Yes.
See, what we have done in our organization is that the low value items, or you can say where repetitive POs are there, and it hardly makes a difference whether we negotiate or we buy it through a catalog buying system. Because I mean, value maybe say maybe 5% of the total spend that we do for the organization in a month, but the number of POs maybe say almost say 30-35% of the total POs. Now, what we have
Right.
done is that we have put them all those items on auto indents, and you can say we have taken a platform like Amazon, yes, literally Amazon itself, where all those items which are non-industrial uses and being used in each of our plants, we are buying it through that platform. That is you can say as good as a catalog buying. And I mean, we have observed that there is hardly any impact on the spent because, I mean, on those low value items, you are not saving up and saving much. Maybe that you are saving more through this catalog buying.
Right, absolutely. Well said. But even Tanisha and had also mentioned that, and now that a lot of such automation is being implemented. So, from what I gather is at least the resistance to technology and automation is no longer there. I think around a decade back, the teams had to first do change management in terms of overcoming the fears and the resistance to that kind implementation of technology. Now it's more about how does the technology help in streamlining and bringing in more efficiencies. So yes, so that's how the whole technology bit has also evolved over the last few years. And given the fact that technology has evolved so much, I would like to now ask my next question to Tanishtha, Saurabh, and Jaswinder, if you would like to add to this. What kind of startups do you see in this space? Uh, and is it that, because startup culture has become so big that, startups are simply coming? How do you look at their different USPs? And is it something that, everyone is getting into a Me Too kind of a startup? So there is some lack in the entire approach of these startups. Tanishtha, if you could shed some light.
Yeah, Charu, so this is a very favorite part of my work. So I have looked into a lot of startups who have pitched, for their products. Today, if you look at, there are very specific solutions that the startups are providing um, across all sectors. But even in procurement, yes, even in procurement, they come with very specific solutions. There are startups who will do only spend analysis for you. There are startups who will only do forecasting for you, price forecasting, right? There are startups who will do, okay, I will help you in sourcing only this one particular category, right? So I would say from the last decade till here, the startups have filled up a huge void, which is, you know, targeting specific problems. Because what we have been doing, we've been having our ERP systems, we've been having systems like either SAP or Oracle based, or even for procurement specific processes like Ariba, Coupa. All these are good, they are there from an end to end procurement process wise. But there are many times where these startups come up with very key solutions s- that helps you to get more value of your investment, right? It solves your problem, you don't have a huge investment also to make, and you get a much shorter in implementation cycle, and you get your you're in production, you're able to use it at a much shorter time frame, right? So those are the areas where I think startups play a big role in today. And to answer your question, what are their, this is their USP, right? But challenges, uh, you when and it's, I think, for us, when we are evaluating a product, whether it is a startup or whether it is an established vendor, right? You have to look at, especially for a startup, how are the founders, what is the experience they are bringing in, right? Who are the SMEs? What is the thought process that's going behind that startup? And especially when you are working with a startup, you also have to be mindful, how financially feasible or viable they are going to be for the next 3 years, 5 years, as long as you are going to have that product with you. So these are the challenges which the startups, at least initial phase startups, do face. The kind of doubts that a potential client may have. But sometimes the brain behind the startups are actual industry experts, who would have extensive amount of years of experience, industry experience. So the quality of startup actually depends a lot on the founders also. So that's you can look at it as a two-sided sword. It can be a USP, it can be a, a risk as well.
Right, absolutely, Tanishta. So I think the objective of the particular startup and the people behind the product, I think the product developers and the brain behind the product is very very important.
Yeah.
Saurabh,
Yes.
please add to this.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Charu, what I feel is that number of, as I mean, is already spoken by the colleague. I mean, many of the startups are coming up since last, you can say, almost a decade or so. And in last 2 3 years, there is further growth in what we I have been seeing, and many of them, without naming them, they are coming up to us and trying to give us a solution. The biggest challenge in last 2 years was that the integration of their system to our SAP system, or maybe whatever system you are running in your organization. Apart from that, we were not able to come out of our existing system 100%. So there was certain duplicacy of, you can say, both the systems running parallelly, and maybe that 100% attention was not there. But as far as the auction platform is concerned, what I could see that, I mean, even if it is not so much integrated, still it was paying. While as far as spend analysis is concerned, yes, it was being. I mean, even after it is not integrated, downloading the data and getting the spend analysis done and reflecting it was possible, but not online. So what I can say is that whatever new startups they are, I mean, coming up, they have to somehow develop APIs to integrate it with the existing systems of the customers, and I think then it will give a very fruitful result, which will be online also, and say very much acceptable also, right from the bottom line to the top line. And another important thing is that say, I mean few of them, maybe 10% of them are coming with complete solution, and new startups have to concentrate more on those areas which are, they'll have to collect data maybe from people like us, or maybe from different organizations, what they are looking for in next 3 years or next 5 years. And based on that, if they come up with a single solution, I mean, maybe for a particular activity also, that will be helpful. Like today, what we can say is that with the growing organization, with the growing multiplication of number of cement companies across India, there will be a competition for securing the material. Maybe it's raw material, or maybe it's I mean any other specific market,
Right.
and how they can help us, or how they can create a competition, a healthy competition, and which can give both the material availability as well as price stability. The way the oil prices are going up, north, how they can help us in providing solution for replacements also. Maybe a product which is made out of steel, but yes, you can use it as in a small, in other materials also, which can be cheaper. So that is where, replacement of items and replacement of technology, or replacement of say equipments, is where or materials. Maybe certain materials are mine materials, and we are looking for a waste from an industry which also gives the same specifications and can replace the mine material. That will help us conserving these resources also, and that will help us in utilization of making the earth green also. So that is
Right.
where startups are. We are looking for startups to work for us.
Thank you, Saurabh. I hope startups are listening. If you have the solution, please contact Saurabhji today. There's business waiting for you there. And in fact, on a lighter note, the well-funded startups have induced a talent crunch in the industry. They are recruiting talent at very very high salaries because they're well funded and they have aggressive growth targets. So my next question is actually on the talent crunch
Now,
we
can I
face.
say one liner more?
Yes, please.
If you,
Yes.
are, if you have got listeners from startup, I'll say that there is a bigger part of cost that lies in logistics also. If we are looking for people who can deploy, you can say electric vehicles or CNGs or LNG trucks for us, maybe which can carry right from 9 tonner carrying capacity to 50 tonner carrying capacity, and we'll be, welcoming them.
Thank you, Saurabh. I just hope that we have the right startups here who would be listening to your requirements. So, like I said, there's been a huge talent crunch because of these guys, the well-funded part of the startups also. So, Jaswinder and Derek, in fact, Saurabh and Tanisha, even you can add to this question. What kind of technology skills or what kind of added skills you would like to see in a procurement manager? Jaswinder, we start with you.
Yeah. So I think when I look at future, I see that going forward we need more data analytics in procurement team. I see that most of the things will go digital, automated, and people sitting on this side of the table have to actually read through more and more data. And data is such a thing that numbers may say something, but underlying information or underlying message could be different under the data. So I think we need more and more people who can understand and get meaningful insights from the data. Second is that we need people who can actually train AIs. Future is going more and more towards AI. We have already implemented AI in procurement for Tata Play, and we need people who can actually train these AIs, because in the initial phases they need to be trained. As more and more AIs will be implemented, it needs to be trained more and more. So we need people who can actually understand data and train AI. That's the future trend for at least next 7 to 10 years.
Of technology related skills would be required. Derek, what are your thoughts?
I echo completely what Jaswinder has said that the AI knowledge, the ability to, like I earlier said, bring back the brain. It's really transfer their knowledge to a machine, and so that is actually very important. So they have to be comfortable. They should. I mean, I expect all of them to be professionals to start, but they also have to be willing to share that knowledge to a machine, without the fear of losing their jobs. But I think along the way, with a procurement manager outside of technology, they also need to be able to motivate their staff to use technology. There are a large community of middle senior age procurement buyers and so on, which have a fear of technology. And as a middle level procurement manager, I would also want someone to be able to bring the whole team of people up and have the ability to enhance technology to a large range of users. To a certain extent, the procurement manager is also a salesperson for the function and for the technologies implemented by the function. So that people's skills, in addition to the technical skills, are equally important compared to just having a completely technically sound person.
Saurabh, would you like to answer what kind of skills, added skills you would like to see in your team?
Yeah, so I think whatever is being said, adding to that, apart from data analytics or technology-driven people, I'll say I'll require more people who are good visionaries and good having good networking skills. So more time will be devoted by them on ground instead of say apart from data analytics, they will have to move out and see what is happening around the world, to meet, to find out new technologies, to meet people around, and set up a target. To work for future, because current work will be taken care of by digitization. So what is required to be done in next 3 years? What is aligning the goals with the company's goals? What they are looking for? How they are expanding? And ultimately, see, they have to be more futuristic and setting tough targets for them also based on the company's goal, futuristic as well as good at networking. And third is that having good data analytics skill and presentation skills.
So I hope the managers out there are listening that skill building to take care of the future is now becoming very, very important. We as managers in whatever functions we are cannot just rest on what we've been doing, but we really have to have a vision for the future. Which now I would like to ask Jaswinder. Jaswinder, what do you think? Is could be a very futuristic procurement technology. I mean, you can go as futuristic as you want, and you can be as wild as you want here. It could be from your wish list that wish this kind of technology was available. Jaswinder?
I'll not go too far away, but I will say that two things that are going to happen in very, very near future. One is the consolidation of the tail spend. That is bound to happen in very near future. The way Saurabh said that they have already moved to catalog buying. More and more companies and more organizations are actually moving to catalog buying, including us as well. So what we are doing is we are moving to catalog. So as more and more organizations move to catalog, this is going to be the norm of the industry, that all the tail spend will move to catalogs, and these catalogs will be AI enabled, wherein as a buyer, if you want to, so I see that tail spend and the core spend will be differentiated going forward. Core spend will continue to be managed by procurement guys directly, because it is the lifeline of the business. It will continue to be there. The tail spend, which is actually contributing more than 30 to 35% of the POs that we issued year on year, that will go to the automation tool, which will be a catalog sort of buying, wherein you just type in your requirement, where do you need it, when do you need it, how much do you need it, and it'll throw back that this is the partner, this is the price, this is the place, and this is the time when it can be delivered to you. If you are okay, just say yes and it will be done. So that is what is going to happen, and this is not very far away from now. This is a matter of a couple of more years, and that is what I envisage as of now.
All right. Thank you, Jaswinder. In fact, that I think that should be giving a lot of ideas to the procurement heads now. That what is it that one should plan now in the next for the next 2 years. So here now we come to our last question, which is a case study. I would ask all of you to kind of give us one example of a successful implementation. It could be anything. So if we could start with Tanishta, please.
Sure. Charu. In fact, I'm just going to give I was just going to give an example that's what Jaswinder just spoke about. So, Jaswinder, you just gave the context of the case study that I was going to give. So, in our company, we did realize that tail spend is, although it is a very small percentage of the total spend, it is taking up a huge amount of effort, number of POs percentage wise you've mentioned. So what we did was we connected with a startup, and what they promised us, what they have what they have told us is they would take care of this entire process, right? So how we do this is, all our a particular category of spend of PRs that we raise, it the startup, the tool that we have from the startup, it integrates, connects with our system, with our ERP system, and based on the criteria of or that we define for the kind of PRs that will be raised under a certain value, etc., those PRs will be picked up, the data picked up by the tool in it with itself within itself has its own network, has its own AI ML algorithms through which it will bring out the best bid for to be delivered for us. It will select the best bid for that particular PR. It will connect back to our system, and it will help to create the PO. And from there, the whole process will rest of the process is automated again back in our system. So we've done this just in last year, and we do look at not only a cost saving in terms of the values, but also a lot of man hours savings from our team perspective as well. So that's one case study, Charu, that I wanted to give an example of.
Great. Thanks so much, Tanishta. Very quickly, we just have about 10-15 minutes now. So, Jaswinder, if you could give us your example, please.
Yeah, so we have implemented full P2P suite in our organization, which has been a very great success for Tata Play. So this is full. It starts from vendor onboarding and it ends up to the payment. So the full procurement suite has been implemented and gave us a lot of advantage to us. I will cite 5 top advantages, and there is a huge long tail of advantages below that also. The first and foremost was that our internal stakeholders were very happy with after implementing this tool, because our overall lead time to issue purchase orders and in completing the entire process has been shrunk to 1/5. So what we used to spend before implementing the tool versus today, it is actually slashed to 1/5 of the time that we used to take. Second, it saved huge amount of time from my procurement team, because this is seamless. So my procurement team saved huge amount of time on it. Then third one is it because it is end-to-end seamless process, it brings huge amount of efficiencies in the whole ecosystem. Fourth one is it's a very transparent process. So my user teams were very happy because they don't have to hunt out where the process currently stuck at, because it is so transparent. It tells you with whom it is, with how many days it is, why it is pending, and all that stuff. So it is because it's a transparent process from all the perspective, from internal stakeholder perspective, from vendor perspective, because they know where the registration process is. E-bidding also happen on the same tool. So they are fully aware what is happening to the negotiation. Payment update is also there on the same portal. Purchase order is also issued to the partner on the same portal. So it's a very, very transparent process, and everyone comes to know where at what stage the procurement process is. And the last but not the least, it throws huge amount of analysis and huge amount of reports to us, which enables us to improve further. So these are top 5 advantages. Other than that, there is a whole list. It is a auditable trail. Everything is integrated. It integrates to ERP, no document, paper, and all those advantages are definitely, the long list is there. But these are the top 5 advantages that I feel that which brought huge satisfaction in the organization by implementing this tool.
Yeah. So thank you, Jaswinder. I think those who are sitting on the fence for this kind of end-to-end integration of processes, I think they can now take a faster, more informed decision. Derek, if you could come up with an example of technology implementation.
Yeah, so what we did is quite similar to what Kanishka did, but we did it a few years back, and we did a very much simpler version of it. It was really a catalog implementation as well, but we didn't do it. We did two parts of it. So we had one part which is a punch out catalog, which was for your tail end spend, your low value spend, and that really punched out to only one agreed supplier where we negotiated a X% off their catalog rates. So the upside for that was they had access to the full catalog. I mean, it was something like Amazon catalog, but we negotiated that we would get whatever percentage of every single transaction. So that for us ended up meaning that instead of everyone going to a procurement team to do a transaction, they actually could do a self-service model, and you could go in, look at their own catalog, like their Flipkart catalog, and just buy what they want. And if it's within their department budget, it will be approved. So that ended up making so much easier, and the objective of that was really to enhance user experience and to get them to buy into the whole procurement is there to support you mindset, rather than procurement is there to help you just negotiate prices. The second part of the catalog implementation, which we did, was for contracted spend, where we have repeated POs and being purchased by different departments in different countries. So again, instead of the various buyers coming to the procurement team and coming to my team asking, hey, help me raise this PO, I need 100 units of this particular item. We actually put all that on the catalog, negotiated prices, and suddenly I had a team which was much more free, and a lot of the users were self-service. What we've actually found quite interesting is that while I need a full-time buyer to manage all the requests, when I spread that roll out to 20 over different departments and who split out to say 2 person per department, for them to raise that one extra PO or their request, their PR, it's really probably only taking them 3 minutes or something. So the actual activity was split out, and we actually had our procurement team being more focused on negotiation, supplier management, really working purely on the escalations, prioritization, and so on. So it was that whole implementation of a tool section of a catalog was actually really, really valuable. And I think the benefits it brought was so much more than we actually expected.
Right.
And yeah, was like I said, anyone on the fence, definitely do it.
Right. Thanks, Derek, for bringing in the entire perspective of bringing in different departments working in different companies. So it brings me to Saurabh. If you could,
Yeah.
explain your one of your technology implementations.
Yes. So we have implemented, you can say, from PR to PO, and also the auction platform. Now we are trying to integrate PO to payment, like the downstream part where post PO dispatches readiness at the supplier's end, and then the dispatch from the supplier end, then receipt at our end, and the payments. That is what we are looking now to integrate into our system. And lastly, I like to more talk about what we are looking for, so that almost what we have done, we have shared. One another part is that we have been processing waste from any industry in our kilns. And as on date, we are almost to say collecting 70,000 tons of waste from pharma companies, FMCG companies, municipal corporations, fertilizer companies, automobile companies, and it is being transported to our units. And all those units, all those customers of ours, which whether it is pharma or any other company, any automobile industry, they are not having storage capacities to store the waste that they are generating every day. So they have to, that material has to be brought to our plants in time, and the placement of vehicle has to be in time. and everything is now means till the material is received or waste is received in our plant, we are everything is blank. What we are looking for is that to integrate the system in such a way that the waste generator and our plant are, that visibility is there, whether how much is the plant of the waste generator running, or when he wants the vehicle to be placed, and we also know that how many vehicles are traveling presently to our plant. So the second part of tracking the vehicles, we are already having one of the startups working with us for the outbound part, that is cement dispatches. So we have a solution for that. Now we want to integrate it with the supplier end as well as our end, so that we can know the visibility of collection of material to disposal at our end, and and disposing it off in an environment friendly manner. That is what we are looking for. I just wanted to share that, because as far as my experiences with PR to PO and auction is concerned, it's very, very good. And we are shortly implementing the supplier onboarding and the PO to payment cycle also, which will be covered maybe in another 2-3 months. We'll be able to make it through.
Thank you, Saurabh, for giving us your insights on what you have been able to implement in your company. So this brings us to the end of the second edition of the virtual Chief Procurement Officers Forum. We hope that it has been a very useful afternoon for our audience. I would like to thank Kanishk, Jaswinder, Saurabh, and Derek for taking time out, joining us, and sharing their learnings and experiences, and making and giving us solutions to a lot of questions most of us would be having in our work. So we hope the audience has got a lot of takeaways from here. This video will continue to be available on Celerity Supply Chain Tribe pages of LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. This virtual forum will also be published as a cover story in our upcoming issue of Celerity Supply Chain Tribe magazine, and the digital copy of the magazine will be shared on LinkedIn as well as via email to all our registered attendees. So thank you once again. Thank you for joining us, and have a good evening and a weekend ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.